Welcome to Here Where You Belong, your go-to podcast for exploring belonging with your host and belonging expert, Dea Irby. We are thrilled to have you join us. Together, we'll dive into the depths of what it means for each of us to find our own place in the world, whether it's within our communities, our relationships, or within ourselves. Today's episode is meant to inspire, uplift, and remind you that no matter where you are or where you're headed, you have a place where you truly belong. So grab a cozy spot and settle in. Welcome to Here Where You Belong.
Hello, awesome belongers. Welcome home to Here Where You Belong podcast. Today's guest learned one of life's most powerful lessons about belonging from a brother the world often overlooked. I'm Dea, your host. Get ready to be inspired and blessed. Help me welcome today's guest, Dr. Stuart D. Jones. Hey, Stuart.
Hi, Dea. Thanks so much. I feel like there was a drum roll in there and I was waiting for the cymbal. That was a beautiful introduction. Thank you. It's great to
Well,
be.
I have so much more to tell about you. Get ready.
I'm ready.
Stuart is an author, a speaker, ordained minister, former university vice president, and passionate advocate for disability dignity, inclusion, and human worth. Aww. Dr. Jones is the author of the award-winning memoir, For the Love of Stephen, the story of a boy who was never broken. A deeply moving true story about his brother, Stephen, who was born with intellectual and developmental disabilities during a time when people like him were excluded from schools, churches, workplaces, and even community life. But Stephen's story became something much bigger. Through love, faith, humor, and perseverance, Stephen taught the people around him what true belonging means. Not simply being allowed into the room, but being seen, valued, loved, and treated as fully human. With both personal experience and years of leadership in education and ministry, Stuart continues to challenge people to rethink how we see those who are often overlooked and reminds us that every person deserves dignity, compassion, and a place where they truly matter. Spectabulous! Stuart, are there any additions, subtractions, or corrections?
No. Pat yourself on the back. A+. Thank you so much. You're very kind. No. Perfect.
I am so excited about hearing your story. And as you know, this podcast is about belonging. And there's so much you can tell us. But the mic is yours. Go for it. Tell us what you want us to know about belonging.
Yeah, I learned it from my brother Stephen, and part of what the memoir about his life is really all about. Stephen taught me about belonging in a couple ways before I even realized I needed to learn what belonging really meant. Because, he didn't use it, he didn't explain belonging. He taught us belonging through his life, through his own actions, the way he accepted people. And Stephen also didn't always belong because he had an intellectual and developmental disability. It was obvious he was a special needs person. So he was often on the outside looking in and wanting to belong. So his life was really kind of an interesting dichotomy between Stephen himself, who felt like everybody belonged. He welcomed everybody because he had a pure heart. And he was so generous and kind spirited that in his worldview, it didn't matter what you looked like, where you came from. Nothing mattered except that you were a human being. And he saw every human being, he really did, as someone whom God created. And he wanted to get to know every human being. I know it's an old cliche, Dea, but people would say, he didn't know a stranger. Well, he didn't. There were no strangers in Stephen's worldview of how he saw human beings, but the world didn't always see him kindly. And Stephen often didn't get the chance to belong because some people, as they see others with special needs, distance themselves out of fear or distance themselves out of prejudice. for that. And so Stephen wasn't always included, but he was kind. My parents were very persevering in that Stephen was their first child. And
Okay, so he's the older brother.
he's my oldest brother. My parents were just a tender age of 18 when Stephen was born. And
Wow.
my parents in 1954, the world was very different then. There was no roadmap for how to work with and help a special needs child flourish. There was no special education. It wasn't really happening yet. There were no services or community resources. So my parents, though, all that they knew was they loved their child. They felt like because he belonged to God, he deserved a chance to be included and belong. So my parents were very persevering in that they worked hard to make sure Stephen was seen. They didn't try to hide him away, and that was common in 1954.
Mm-hmm.
Children with disabilities were either put in institutions or just hidden away in the house with the parents and family and never really got out much. My parents were like, this is our son, Stephen. He belongs, doggone it. You're going to see him and you're going to love him and you're going to include him. And I love that about my parents. It
How
was,
awesome.
yeah, it was just easier, Dea, for me and my other brother, Scott, and my other sister, my oldest sister, Susan. We were neurotypical. We belonged. I had this ability to kind of be a chameleon and I could fit in. And I still do. I fit into situations. Belonging was a foreign concept to me because I just belonged, right? I didn't ever face prejudice or rejection or segregation or discrimination. I just didn't. But Stephen did. And as I got older and wiser and watched his life, I realized this is a man who faced all of that. And yet he loved anyway. He was never bitter, never resentful towards people, but always wanting to try to belong to them and belong with them. And he knew he had enough of an innate instinct that he knew when people didn't want him around, but yet at the same time, he still showed love. So I learned a lot about belonging just on the fact that I always belonged, and Stephen struggled to belong. Interesting spectrum, interesting ends of the spectrum, isn't it, in terms of our
Right,
lives?
right. I Your parents named all of you with names that start with an S, didn't they?
Yeah, it was an
Stephen,
accident.
Stuart, Scott, and Susan.
Yeah, my mom and dad, I've asked them that before, and it's just like, you know what? It was an accident. We ended up with all these S names. Then Stuart, when you came along, we realized there's Steve, Susan, and Scott. I guess we better give you an S name. So they thought about what should we name him. My mom says I like Stuart, so I got the name Stuart. So they had a alliteration of S's throughout the Jones family, I guess.
That helps the parents when they go, then you can at least start the first sound when you're trying to figure out which name you're trying to call. That's great.
Well,
So where
yeah,
did you grow up? Where did you grow up?
oh, we grew up in Lafayette, Indiana. I'm a Hoosier boy.
Okay,
Lafayette,
Indiana.
yeah, it's kind of in the northwest part of Indiana, and right across the river from Lafayette's West Lafayette, and that's Purdue University. So I kind of
Mhm.
grew up in Purdue town, where Purdue was right there. Purdue played a role in my brother's life, as people who will read the book or have read the book will see. Purdue really played a nice role in helping my parents get started with the educational process that Stephen needed. But yeah, Lafayette, Indiana, it was a great town. I can't think what the population was back then. Back in the time when I grew up, I would say close to 100, maybe, well, not quite 100,000, maybe 50,000 or so. And it's much larger now. But it was a good place to grow up. It was a good community. I still think highly of Lafayette, Indiana.
Well, yeah, because the community makes a big difference too. If you've got
Mhm.
my hometown uh, is the birthplace of the very first patient one, Donald Triplett was the first autistic patient
Oh,
diagnosed.
Oh, I didn't know that. I love history. I love little tidbits like that. But
Yes.
that was the first autistic diagnosis was there?
Yes,
Oh,
and his
wow.
mother, you mentioned this, his mother was told, well, there's nothing we can do for him. You need to institutionalize him. So he was
Yeah.
institutionalized at like 1. And they
Mm.
locked him in this dark room. And
Uh,
she very rarely did she get to visit him. But after a year, she said, this is not what we're going to do. He
right. Good
just
for her.
recently died a couple of years ago. Um, And so she took him home, and he ended up growing up. He traveled by himself to multiple countries. He
Good.
could drive. He would go to his parents, his dad, I guess you owned the bank. The bank was his. And so he he was on the spectrum where, I mean, he could, Asperger's maybe
Yeah, yeah,
also.
yeah, yeah.
But
Right.
yeah, there's a video in a different key, a documentary that was made
Oh, okay.
about his life, to look that up.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
but was a remarkable. I sang in the choir with him.
Oh, how wonderful. Well, and as you know, one of the most famous autistic persons who's quite a genius is Temple Grandin, Dr.
Oh,
Temple
yes,
Grandin. Yeah, and she was kind enough to write the foreword for my book,
that's
which
wonderful.
such a blessing. She wanted to, I asked her if she would consider it, and I didn't know her at the time. She said, "Send me your manuscript." And she read it, and she was so kind to say, "Stuart, this is a beautiful story, very inspirational. Parents of those with special needs children, whether autistic or Asperger's or intellectual disability, doesn't matter." She said, "It's very inspiring to parents." Because, Dia, I was inspired by my parents, the way that they insisted that Steve belong. The longing was all about my parents saying, "This is our son." Society doesn't understand him. And in that day, society rejects them. But this is our son, and we're going to make sure he belongs. And I think he did live a rich and full life because my parents and us as siblings, we insisted that the world see our brother, who we were not ashamed of, we were proud of, and that the world accept him and accept what he had to offer the world, which was a lot more than people ever thought possible. So I'm very proud of my parents and their
That
belonging kind of attitude.
totally, totally. Well, it's that barrier that if you can get past it to
Yes,
really see someone, because
yes.
every person has something to offer the world.
Thank you for saying that. That's spot on perfect. I address that very issue early in my book. I call my book a mirror, a memorial, and a movement. It's a mirror because as you read Stephen's story, you will be forced, Dia, to face your own, the way you see people with disabilities. Are you afraid of them? Do you pity them? Do you judge them? Do you think they're less than? Do you dismiss them? Do you exclude them? You will have to look in a mirror because all the readers that have given me feedback, which has been a lot, have said, I have to do things differently going forward because of your book. I have to see
Wow.
people fully as human.
Wow. I'm just thinking about when Stephen was born, the world was like, didn't know how to deal with things. And
Right.
it grew up into, well, now we have all these services. But I think we're on the decline where, well, we can just get rid of them.
Mm,
We can
mm,
throw them away. Or like, oh, it looks like your child may have this. Do you want to have an abortion? We just need to
mm.
get rid of it. So I think we've passed an arc where, we've gotten so advanced, we can find out if they're wanted or not. But so many people talk about their challenged children are the greatest gift.
Yeah, yeah. Dia, that's an excellent point. I really appreciate you bringing that up. You're right. Parents today have different decisions to make. That is one of them. Knowing ahead of time, does your child have a special need or a disability? And if so, do you want to have the child? That wasn't true in the 1950s. I mean, they weren't, that science and technology didn't exist, or in the 60s or the 70s or the 80s. So you had a special needs child, but in that era, still, as we pointed out, parents still had to make a decision after birth. Do I keep the child? Do I put it in an institution, him or her in an institution, and kind of forget that it ever happened? My parents belligerently said no to our family doctor, who said, put him in an institution. And my father's mother, Stephen's grandmother, said, oh, you ought to put him in an institution. My parents said, no, this is our first child. We are
And
not putting him
wait,
away.
and they were 19?
Yeah, they were 19 years old. How many 19-year-olds do you know that can make that kind of a big life decision? My,
Wow.
yeah, my parents did it, and they never looked back. But I think one of the most heartwarming things about my parents' mindset was early on, they heard all the doom and gloom, Dia, from doctors and clinicians and people that were theorists in the field of disabilities. And they said, your child's not going to be able to do much, probably won't speak, probably won't walk very well, won't be able to ever hold a job, won't function well in social circles. My parents kind of heard all the doom and gloom prognosis, but a very quick story that I think is beautiful in the book is one day my aunt, Betty, insisted that this was her first nephew. She insisted that he learn to coordinate his feet and pedal a tricycle. And doctor said he's not going to be able to do that. Well, Betty worked with him every day of one summer until Steve pedaled that tricycle. And my parents, according to them, they came running out of the house when Betty was screaming because they thought something was wrong. But they saw Steve pedaling a tricycle as a 3-year-old, right? And most kids can do that when they're 1 or 2. But Steve finally was pedaling a tricycle. My father just screamed with joy. My mother cried. That's what she does. My father screamed as though he had won the Tour de France or something. But my parents said that was a pivotal turning moment for them because from that moment on, they decided we're going to adopt hope, not fear. And we're going to find out what can Stephen do. We're no longer listening to what can't he do. What can he do? And I have a chapter entitled that, What Can He Do?
That is a great challenge no matter how able-bodied you are.
Mm-hmm.
There's
right.
a mental barrier that, well, I can't do that, or I'm going to yes, you
right.
can. Go for it. Well, you may not be able to win the Tour de France, but you tricycle.
Yeah.
That is a Tour de France victory at your stage. How old is he still alive?
Yeah, Stephen passed away. Actually, he was tragically killed about 20 years ago. It's ironic the way he was killed, as I put in the book, because Stephen fought, and my parents fought, we fought our whole lives for Stephen to be seen and to belong. And it was ultimately the driver of a car who didn't see Steve on his bicycle, riding his bike to work because he wasn't able to drive, who didn't see Steve, that hit him and killed him. He wanted to be seen, and ultimately, when he wasn't seen by a driver, he was hit and killed. But that was 20 some years ago. Steve would be 72 years old today. He died when he was about 52 years old. Yeah, we lost.
But he was riding a bike to work.
Yeah, that's how Steve got around in Lafayette, Indiana. Steve just wasn't able to drive a car. It was too stressful and nerve-wracking. And a funny story in the book was he got all the way through a private driver's education lesson, and then in his actual driver's test, he had a wreck.
Okay.
So he flunked.
No
Needless
kidding.
to say.
Wow. Well, we could talk forever and ever and ever, but all these nice little stories can be found in the book. So we're going to take a break here, and I'm going to recommend people just order the book because we'll be right back with Stuart. Hey there. Isn't my guest amazing? So glad you joined us today. In this world that often feels disconnected, building community and fostering belonging are essential. That's why I created this podcast, to bring inspiring people to you, to encourage you to create that sense of belonging and community, no matter where you are. If you're being blessed by my guest, and we have some more, like, subscribe, and share this podcast. You know who needs to hear this. Stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember, you belong. Now, back to our amazing guest. Welcome back with my wonderful guest today, Stuart Jones. As you know, on the second half of the show, I ask my 3 favorite questions. And of course, I have to ask Stuart the same questions. The first one is, what do you consider is your greatest accomplishment? Now, this is going to be a challenge for you because you've had so many accomplishments. But what do you consider your greatest accomplishment? And you can talk about the other ones too, but.
Yeah, I can't wait. I hope someday God will reveal to me what God believes my greatest accomplishment is. And I hope it's changing people's lives. I feel like my greatest accomplishment to date, and I've done a lot in my lifetime. I've been so blessed. It has to be writing this book, and I'll tell you why in the simplest of terms. I do believe I was called to ministry, and I do believe ministry takes many forms. I've done ministry in universities, in churches, with advocacy organizations, charitable work, blah, blah, blah. But I feel like part of what I'm trying to do is just show and teach the love of God. And the fact that this book and the reviews I've gotten, which are many, and I'm so appreciative, I read the reviews, every one of them. The fact that people are telling me it has changed their mind and their heart and changed them as people, I feel like, wow, if God, through Stephen's life, through my writing, is impacting other people's lives for the good, I don't know what a greater accomplishment can be for me before I leave this earth. I'm just really fortunate, Dia. That's what I would say. I would say the book has been.
Well,
The book has
also
been.
the blessing of hearing from the people. I mean, the
Yes.
accomplishment, everybody, oh, well, I don't know what you may know, the percentage of people that say they're going to write a book. I think everybody has a book in them. And then
Yes.
people say, I'm going to write a book one day. I'm going to write a book. But and then a less percentage start it. How
Yeah.
many finish the book?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then to have finished the book and get to realize the impact it's having, to be blessed to hear from the readers that this has changed my life.
Hmm.
That,
Yeah.
yeah. So I like to talk to people about how they got their book written because one of our listeners might have a book that they're supposed to write and they keep thinking one day, one day. So
Yeah.
what made you say, okay, I'm going to write the book? Or how long did that take
Yeah.
to
What finally
decide?
was, yeah, the catalyst to get me moving was retirement, I think. And again, a long story short, I've wanted to write Stephen's story. I think I started thinking about it a few years after his death. Because as we gathered together as a Jones family and Stephen was no longer there, people just started sharing all kinds of Stephen stories. And my parents opened up more. You can remember they're post World War II generation. Those are not open people. They keep everything to themselves. So pulling Stephen stories out of them, and I spent hours doing that. But the more I learned about Stephen, the more I thought, wow, I didn't know this stuff. I didn't know Stephen did this. I didn't know this person abused him. I didn't know he accomplished that. Now, I was part of his life, but a lot of things happened with Stephen and my parents only that they kind of shielded from us as kids for one reason or another. So as I learned more about Stephen's life, I thought I've got to write this down, not because Stephen was extraordinary, but because Stephen represents millions of people born with disabilities whose voices need to be heard, whose stories need to be told because there's something to learn from them. So finally, at retirement from being a vice president at universities, I said, I have no more excuses. I've got to sit down. And I prayed to God and I just needed help and inspiration. And I didn't have any trouble sitting down and writing and writing and writing and writing and interviewing people, especially my family, and writing and learning and writing. The challenge for me became I had all of these stories like pieces of a puzzle. How do I put it together in a meaningful, intriguing, and compelling book? That was more of the challenge was putting the puzzle together so that for the reader they would fit, make sense, and make them think and inspire them. So that's where I think God had a big hand in helping me think this process through.
That's so well, of course, there are a lot of things about Stephen you didn't know because how much older was he than you? You were the
Yeah,
fourth.
about 8 years older than me. Right,
So
right.
he was already 8 years old when you came
Hmm.
into the picture, and then your first year or two, you don't even know anybody else exists, but your food in front of you and your toy that you don't want anybody else to take. So maybe he was already 10. How
Yeah,
many experiences had he already had? Well, that you definitely met that goal
yeah.
from, okay, now I'm retired, no more excuses till printed and on the shelves. How long was that?
Yeah, yeah. That took again the whole writing process. the beta reader process, which is where people read your manuscript, like Temple Grandin. And I had 4 other amazing people who read and give me feedback. Then you got to give it to an editor who tears it up, spits it out, and gives it back to you, which again was actually a great process. Great. It was painful, but a great process. It reminded me of my PhD dissertation, where your faculty, take your research and they say this is crap, redo it. but my editor didn't do that. My editor said this stuff's good. This needs to go. This makes no sense. That whole process was a little over a year until I finally got it in publishing mode. And then you got to get, of course, people to design your book, the cover, format the book, insert the pictures that you want. It took a little over a year, and that's kind of a short time, Dea. But if you knew me, I'm such a driven person that when I decide to do something, I will go at it nonstop. And so I did it with a little over a year. And I know people, it can take them 5 years and more to get a book finally cranked out.
Right, right. And when was it released?
November of last year, of 2025, it was released. Yeah.
So it hadn't been out a year.
And what a blessing it's been for me, because I have just been all over the place. I can't really call it a book tour. It's not really, but it feels like a tour to me, because I've been invited and I've gone to so many places to talk about the book and Stephen's story. I've been at book clubs and libraries and bookstore events. I've got one coming up in another week. I'll be at a large bookstore at an author event signing books. I've been invited to a university to speak to special education teachers for the future.
Perfect.
I loved that. But I'm going to some book festivals where I've been invited as an author. I've done media interviews. The book was featured in a magazine. I've done television interviews, podcasts with wonderful people like you. And I mean that, Dea. You are a blessing. That's been a lot of fun doing podcasts. So I've just been really going, not to sell books. I don't care about selling books. I care about telling Stephen's beautiful story so that other people can be inspired by it, to make changes, if needed, to make changes in their own life and to become people of action on behalf of the disabled community. That's what I'm really trying to do.
Well, it does end up selling books, because people, you got to hear the story. Well, you can't be everywhere. Here, read his book. Oh, you got to read this book. Oh, I want all the teachers in this department to read this book. So,
yeah.
I mean, what a tool God has gift wrapped you to bring to the world.
Yeah. And thanks for saying that. That helped me remember. Not only did I speak at a university, but there's a university. I don't want to say it yet because it's not in the curriculum yet. But the head of the education department at a university in Massachusetts is going to require the book For the Love of Stephen to their education majors for reading.
Because it should be. It should be.
The faculty member there said, Stuart, that what's so wonderful about the book is it's not theory and it's not teaching them how to do things in the classroom. It's a real story that they need to put themselves into to understand people like Stephen, the children they're going to work with. And I said, thank you. That's just beautiful. Thank you.
That that could totally change the trajectory.
It could, yeah. I just got to get Harvard, Princeton, and Yale on board. I'm just kidding.
Don't kid. It could happen. It could happen. We'll see. God has a purpose for this book. He didn't put you through all that to get it out. God is, it's the tool that he wants to use, because he gift wrapped you to get it done.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. Thank you. I had a person at a book event recently almost brought me to tears, because she raised her hand. Usually I take questions and answers, but she raised her hand. She said, Stuart, I don't know your brother. I feel like I know him better because I've read your book. But she said he would be so proud of you. And that really got me in front of a crowd of people. I kind of had to swallow hard. And I said, thank you. I had to pull myself back together, because that was just, I don't know. I hadn't really thought. I hadn't thought about, would Steve be proud of this? But in that moment, I had to think about it, and that really moved me, and I really appreciated it.
And your parents.
Yeah, so they are both alive, and they are very proud. They're 90 years old. doing pretty well. They still live in their little tiny house in a little tiny Indiana town, and they brag to everybody about the book about their oldest son, written by their youngest son. And but when I at the time I interviewed them a couple years ago, they were their acuity was so sharp, their mental cognitive ability was so. I was so
Amazing.
fortunate to get from them and extract from them finally all of the information I needed to put Stephen's story together because so much of it I didn't know. And I learned so much about Stephen through them.
Right.
So
And you probably learned more about your parents too.
I really did. Dea, thank you. I've always loved them, but I gained a whole new respect for what they went through to give
Hmm.
Stephen the fullest life they could in a time when no one was helping them navigate. They just had to go with love and instincts all the way through that journey. And they did it
Wow.
well. They did it so well.
Okay. Well, we've covered question one. We have two more to
Oh,
go.
gosh. Okay. I got to be more succinct and shorter in my answers.
No, no, no. I'm loving all of this. The second question is what makes you feel like you belong?
Yeah. For me, belonging is not just being with a group of people. What makes me feel like I belong is when one, two, three, or several people in any kind of situation includes me either in a conversation or pulls me in or asks me a question. That's what helps me belong. Because in another interview that I did about diversity and inclusivity, sometimes including people can be performative and sometimes disingenuous. It's like, well, we got to include all these people because we're supposed to. You can sit in a room but still not belong. You can be with a group of people and included but not really belong unless you know that your voice is being heard, you're being acknowledged, you are recognized in some way, verbally or non verbally. So for me, that's what makes it feel like I belong. I've sat in many rooms, many meetings, many conferences, and I have felt like an outsider at times until somebody pulls me in and makes me feel seen and heard. And that's what belonging to me is. It's the difference between being included and actually belonging. And Dia, that was one question I asked my lecture hall of special education future teachers. I said to them, of course, you're going to have classrooms of special needs students. They will be included. But I asked them, how will you make them belong and know that they're loved and cared for and trusted and that they can trust you? There's a difference between including them and helping them belong. And that's
Totally
what it
agree
is
with
for
that.
me. No, dear,
Totally
thank
agree with
you.
that. Yes.
Thank
Just because you've included someone doesn't mean they're woven in.
you. Exactly. I like that illustration. Woven in is exactly right. And for Stephen, I never had, as I said earlier, I didn't have a problem belonging. I'm really outgoing, extroverted, and gregarious, as you can tell, and so are you. So for us, it's a little bit easier to belong. But for Stephen, navigating whether or not people wanted him to belong, that was tough. That's why my father just kept taking him to things like, Stephen, you're going to join the Boy Scouts. There was no special ed Boy Scouts, but here's my son, Stephen. He wants to belong. And then he took him to 4-H. Stephen's going to join your 4-H. And they never had a special needs child in 4-H before. Stephen's going to join church. Stephen's going to join your bowling league. Stephen's going to play volleyball in the church. My parents just made sure Stephen was seen and ultimately tried to help him belong. And they taught people how to include and let Stephen belong. I loved that. So that's belonging.
Well, yes. And as they did this for Stephen, they were changing the perspectives and mindsets of the people that were then
Yes,
encouraged to include him, like
yes,
the Boy Scout leader.
yes,
He has
yeah,
a Cub Scout there, and now he's got to figure out how to deal with it and have a perspective and see Stephen for who he is, not
yeah.
what he does or his condition or whatever.
Exactly. Seeing him as fully human. And yes,
Right.
and as Temple Grandin says all the time, he's different, but not less, just different. And I love that her mantra, different, not less.
And she's definite testimony about that.
Yeah.
Right. Because way back when there was an expression, God don't make no junk.
It's in my book.
Okay. Yes. God don't make no junk. He has a it were my life verse is Ephesians 2:10. For we are his workmanship, created in
Yes.
Christ Jesus for good works, which he
Yes.
prepared beforehand for us to
Yes.
walk in. So we have been created to be the person we need to be with the gifts and talents to accomplish the work that he has set out for us to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And if I may, I God don't make no junk is the title of chapter 8 in my book. It's based on Psalm 139:14. I praise thee because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. I am a wonderful work, and I know that full well. And that means everybody. You're right. God don't make no junk. Stephen was created by God, and is every human being, regardless of their condition or their color of their skin, all loved by God, all people for whom Christ died. We've got to start seeing every human as a full human being for whom God created, not by mistake, but God created and God loves them, and so should we.
So there are multiple people born totally, according to the growth chart and everything, healthy
Mm-hmm.
that live and die
Mm-hmm.
and never change a life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stephen lived his life, inspired you, God led you to write a book, and
Mm-hmm.
he is changing the world from his life.
Thank you for that. And one of the ways that kind of hit me like a ton of bricks was at Stephen's funeral. Stephen died just before Christmas, just a few days before Christmas, and I think it was the year 2005. And at his funeral showing, me and my family couldn't believe this is just a few days before Christmas, the hustle and bustle of the holiday, and people got things to do, and it's cold outside. 300 people whom Stephen had touched in some way through his work, his activities at church, in the bowling league. 300 people. Dea, I'll be lucky if 30 people show up to mine. That would be a miracle. 300 people came because they loved Stephen, and they all told us stories about how they knew Stephen. And we just soaked this in like sponges, the ways they had met him on a bus or at church, or they worked with Stephen at the hospital. He was a janitor for 33 years at a hospital. He loved his job and kept it for 33 years. He did that work. 300 people came to say, we loved Stephen Keith Jones. That moved me, and I realized Stephen wasn't trying to change people's lives, but he did. He did by being Stephen.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
He was being who God created him to be. Just
Yeah.
like we all need to be the person God created us to be and not try to be somebody else. Because then we
Exactly.
can't do our work if we're somebody else.
Well said. Well
So,
said.
the last question, we are moving along.
Yes, we are.
Your favorite quote?
My favorite quote, I've got a couple of them, but I'm going to go with my favorite poet, Maya Angelou, because I'm a person of action. And I like what she said. She said, I quoted this in a sermon just last Sunday. I'm filling in at some pulpits from time to time. Maya Angelou said, people will forget what you say. People will forget what you do, but people will never forget how you made them feel. And I have learned that over living for 65 years. I can talk a good talk and I can do some good things. People will forget, the students I've taught will forget, my staff will forget what I say and what I do. But the way I make them feel is something they will cherish and never forget. And we got to remember that too. When it comes to the lives of people like Stephen, you can talk about helping them, you can talk about doing things, but how you make them belong and how you make them feel, they'll never forget that.
Oh, wow. Yes. That's Stuart, that's wisdom. Wisdom. It was a well constructed reminder sentence because it's true. And that
Yeah.
helps.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, before we close, Do you have any parting words for our listeners?
Yes. Thank you. Thank you in advance for, I hope you'll get the book or at least read parts of what the book is about. And my parting words for those, I hope and I want to thank you in advance for thinking about people like Stephen and the millions that God has given us. And I want you to do something other than just feel bad for their situation because pity is not what they seek. Please help them belong. And belonging is as simple as going to a person that you may not feel comfortable going to, but going to that person regardless and just saying hi and hello or good morning. My name is Stuart. It's nice to meet you because so many people who are challenged are ignored. And I don't think people do it to be cruel. I just think they do it because they're uncomfortable or they pity or they fear. So, my words of wisdom to those people, please make those in our disabled community feel like they belong. You'll have a dear friend for life, and you will have done something for great kindness and for great good.
Oh, what a good word. Yes, yes. Thank you.
Thank
Oh,
you.
to our amazing guest, thank
Thank
you, Stuart.
Thea, thank
And
you.
to our listeners, belongers, stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember you belong. This is Dea Irby with Here Where You Belong podcast, signing off. Bye now.
Thanks for tuning in to Hear Where You Belong. We hope today's episode has inspired you to embrace the beauty of belonging in your own life. Remember, no matter where you are or where you're headed, you have a place where you truly belong. Join us again next time for more insightful conversations and heartwarming stories. Until then, stay connected, stay true to yourself, and always remember that you belong.